Whenever a classic game receives a remaster, especially one from the Nintendo DS era, it's a cause for celebration. After all, it means that a game is no longer confined to older hardware and allows it to become more accessible to all gamers. When I saw Rune Factory 3 would finally get that special treatment on modern consoles, I was very excited. But unfortunately, I feel that the remastered effort is lacking needed updates. Before we get into the review, we'd like to thank our Patreon supporters for making this possible. Please take a second to check out patreon.com/noisypixel to support independent game journalism. In Rune Factory 3 Special, you play as Micah, an amnesiac protagonist who suddenly wakes up after being rescued by Shara, the town's local florist. What makes Micah different from other Rune Factory protagonists is that he is half human and half monster. As you clear through each of the dungeons, you'll discover more about his past. In combat, there are various weapon types to choose from. The more you use a particular weapon, the more you'll level up for that skill. Furthermore, after defeating the first boss, Micah gains the ability to transform into a monster. By accessing the transformation belt, you'll be able to switch between both forms. While in monster form, your attack is scaled to your level rather than the weapon you have equipped. On that note, if you thought Rune Factory 3 was too easy on the DS, then Special has your masochist urges covered with the new Hell difficulty. As the name implies, this difficulty greatly increases the damage you take, with some enemies even being capable of killing you in one hit if you're not too careful. Each of the dungeons in Rune Factory 3 are themed after a season, but every time before you get to a boss, there will be some sort of contraption that prevents progression. Other than some vague hints from characters, by and large, you're sort of forced to either fumble around for a solution or look it up in a guide. Similar to Rune Factory 4 Special, this version of Rune Factory 3 contains the addition of Newlywed Mode, which unlocks after you've married one of the 11 possible female characters with no option to marry the males. To get married though, you must first beat the game. It's not a particularly tough task because if you know what you're doing, there's a pretty straightforward path to get to the final boss before you end the first in-game year. Even if you're not rushing it, there isn't a strict time limit. Still, to unlock a cutscene in Newlywed Mode, you must first marry the respective girl, which means you're essentially required to get married 11 times. Unfortunately, there is no New Game Plus, so you're sort of required to load from a point before the final boss, or you'll be forced to go through the tutorial all over again. Thankfully, when it comes to the save file, you have a whopping 21 of them as opposed to the DS's 3. That being said, the story isn't half bad because of the amnesiac protagonist plot. Rune Factory 3 uses how Micah is both a monster and human in a clever way. While you solve the world's problems, you'll also try to close the rift that has been created between the human race and monster race. One of the new additions to Special is a dungeon located in the basement of the Shrance Tree. As you progress through the story, you'll steadily unlock segments of it, which contains a wave of enemies you must defeat in order to proceed. You can even find several kinds of items, such as food and even levelers, which are potions that will instantly level you up. Still, completing all of these dungeons will earn you nothing but a trophy, though it is an easy accessory if you want to grind for some levels. I should say don't let the recommended level of these dungeons fool you though. There is a bit of challenge here, especially at the bottom where a big boss waits to deal heavy damage. In an encounter where you don't have the proper weapon skill, you'll likely be chugging down on healing items as you try to chip away at its health. Unfortunately, that's about where the new additions end. There are hardly any quality of life improvements over the DS release, and unfortunately, that means that some of those systems are really starting to show their age. Most notably is how swinging your weapon can deplete your RP, which is something that can take you by surprise, especially on earlier levels where you have barely any to your name. Further, the in-game backgrounds clearly feel like they were just thrown into a rudimentary upscaling algorithm, as all of them look like an incredibly smooth, smeary mess, especially in places where there were signposts with text on them. The controls also feel overly responsive sometimes, especially in combat where it's difficult to properly aim your combos towards the enemy. Worse, the option to adjust that can only be accessed through the title screen, and you must restart the game in order to change this setting. In fact, only settings available in-game are options that will invert a button layout or turn the BGM entirely off. Options such as anti-aliasing and post-processing can only be adjusted from an in-game configuration tool launched before the game on PC. There's also no way to customize your home however you like, as any furniture or crafting station that you purchase from shops are placed in fixed locations. However, if you happen to own Rune Factory 4 Special or Rune Factory 5 on the same device you're playing, you can change Micah's outfit into one worn by the male protagonist of those titles. One of Rune Factory 3's most memorable features was the Zany Dialogue that hooked you in, but in Special, all of that has been retranslated or changed in some way. This new translation isn't bad, but the delivery was lacking given that some of the jokes you might have recalled from the DS aren't here. On the other hand, there are a few inaccurate instructions found, such as during the Bean Toss Festival dialogue, where it implies that if you are hit by a failed dish, your score is zeroed out, which is completely incorrect. Rune Factory 3 Special is a great way for both new and old fans of the series to experience the DS classic. Still, I wish it had gone a bit further with the remastered effort, as many of its systems haven't aged well. The added features here don't make up for the lack of quality of life improvements that would have done the title a big favor. It's not unplayable by any means, but this remastered isn't as special as it could have been. Noisy Pixel is giving Rune Factory 3 Special a 7 out of 10. Thanks for watching. This video is brought to you by our supporters on Patreon. Noisy Pixel is run by a group of gamers providing independent gaming coverage through news, reviews, previews, and more. Check out our Patreon to help support our continued growth and subscribe to keep up with all our future content.
Noisy Pixel.